We're gonna do this. Okay. I almost had it. It's my hair is moving around. Ta-da! It's that time of year, everybody. Okay. I just washed my hair too. Don't want that to go anywhere. Okay. So let's get back into some of these supplemental reports real quick, okay? Goodness gracious. I hope everybody is gearing up for a wonderful Halloween season, a wonderful Thanksgiving, a wonderful Christmas, and a wonderful New Year. And I pray everybody, your kids, your spouses, your family, kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody. I pray everybody has everything that they ever hoped for, ever dreamed for this holiday season. And I'm going to keep saying it until the holiday season is over. So let's get into this really quick. We left off with interview with Kathy Cruz. No, I'm sorry. The one before that. It's an interview with James Michael LaForce. And this report was taken on June 25th of 2015. But that's the report time that it was entered. But it tells you in the beginning of the report when it actually took place. So there's a discrepancy between when some of these took place and when they were later recorded. And some of them are even almost 2 months, like from the time that the actual, let me make myself very clear here, okay? It says on June 16, 2015, that is the day after the Gypsy Rose and Nicholas Godejohn are found and arrested in Wisconsin. Okay, but this report was not entered or recorded until June 25th. So that's a week later. But some of these reports are not recorded until almost 2 months later, close to 8 weeks or so. So when I say report time, that's when they entered it. And then I will go on to say the beginning of the report. It'll say when it was actually when it took place. So in this report, it says June 16th, 2015, the day after that they were arrested and whatnot. It says, I was assigned to contact Mike LaForce. LaForce had reported observing a male subject walking outside of the brush on Old Boulevard Road. And that's in Springfield, Missouri. LaForce believed the male could be related to the homicide of Claudinia Blanchard. On June 17th, at 16:48 hours, I contacted LaForce by phone. LaForce identified himself as James Michael LaForce. LaForce also stated his identifying information such as date of birth. And he provided his residential address, which is in Springfield, Missouri. On the morning of June 14th, 2015, at approximately 10:15 hours, LaForce and his wife had observed a 20 to 25-year-old white man walking in a northwestern direction from the brush on the northeast corner of Farm Road 139 and Farm Road 102 intersection in Springfield, Missouri. Not an address, it's just a location that I'm specifying here. LaForce believed the male was possibly walking to an abandoned schoolhouse located on the northwest side of the aforementioned intersection. LaForce described the male as weighing 170 to 180 pounds, having light-colored hair, no beard, wearing a green shirt, dark jeans or slacks. LaForce noted the male's appearance to be dirty. LaForce had no other information regarding the male subject. LaForest reported the information because he believed it may, in some way, be pertinent to the investigation of Claudina Blanchard's death. And that's it. But you know, in high-profile cases such as this, it is not uncommon for people to insert themselves. Some of you who have been here with me for a while know this story, but my grandfather, my mother's father, he was the youngest of 5 brothers. In 1926, his second oldest brother, Willard Lemire, ended up missing. He was 9, and he had his 9-year-old best friend. They are what they are dubbed as the original Lost Boys of Detroit. And in the search for his brother, now my grandfather was 3 at the time. His oldest brother, Francis, was 10. Willard was 9. The other brother had passed away that was in between. He was the third born. Then my grandfather's other brother, Clifford, was 5, and my grandfather was 3. So at this time, they had been looking for over 4 months before they find the body of my great uncle. In 2 months, they had found the body of his friend. They went to a moving picture show on 3rd Avenue, which is today called Detroit Cinema. And the building is still standing, but it's not... It's far enough from Belle Isle that 2 9-year-old boys in the middle of March in Michigan are not going to be walking to Belle Isle. And so it was suspected that they might have went to Belle Isle, but the harbor master is located on Belle Isle. You can't cross the bridge going over on the Detroit River onto Belle Isle without the harbor master seeing you. Not in 1926, not today in 2025. And they used to keep the stables. They're still there on Belle Isle. In the last 100 years, you know, it was really broken down and broken apart, and then they've redone it. And now they don't use the stables that's on Belle Isle the way that they used to for horses, for law enforcement. But we've had so many out of all of these articles that are all from 1926. And I went through the work for a year of going through each one of these and putting them all in order, transcribing some of them that you can't see. There's over 160 total that I found pertaining to my grandfather's brother, but you would not believe how many people had reported seeing them, to the point where my great-grandfather had traveled all the way to Jackson, all the way to St. Clair County, where I'm located, all the way to Bay City, Michigan. They had reports of them possibly being in France, in Quebec, Canada, which is where my family, my great-grandparents had originally came from. Reports of them being all the way in Florida, in the Keys, to Chillicothe, Missouri. There was even reports of them being in Atlanta, Georgia. 2 young 9-year-old boys, and turns out none of it was true. There was even a man who had pretended to be a law enforcement officer who came to my great grandparents' home and actually was dressed like a Michigan State cop, trying to elicit money out of my great grandparents, knowing that they had a 9-year-old son missing with his 9-year-old best friend. And of course, the best friend ended up deceased and in the river 2 months later. And then my great uncle was found over 4 months later. And they do not know what happened. They do not know what happened. But they do know that they dredged the river for 16 days straight. They had airplanes from Selfridge Air Base, which is not far from where Belle Isle is. They also had divers. They had over 6,000 Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts that had been looking for them. And what's crazy about that, they dredged the river over and over. The harbor masters, the Ontario, the Canadian side of the river, they had their provincial police and their Coast Guard units were all looking in that area just in case if they did go to Belle Isle to play and something happened and they just both happened to go in the river. But none of the trolley workers, none of the bus lines, none of them ever remember seeing 2 9-year-old boys that day at all. They just disappeared from 3rd Avenue going to see a moving picture show. So I have done videos going over this, but it's absolutely insanity just how many people will come out of the woodworks and insert themselves into an active investigation. And I can't believe that this March will be 100 years. I found out where he's buried because, of course, I come from a very devout Catholic French family. So there is a Catholic cemetery down in Detroit called Mount Elliott Cemetery. They gave my great-grandparents the plot for free when his body had washed up in Ontario, all the way by Lake Erie, way on like the Canadian side. Wasn't even nowhere near where they lived. 4 months later, they gave them a children's plot for free. And so he doesn't have a headstone. He's never had a headstone, but he has been recorded. So I was able to find exactly where he's at. And the thing that bothers me about that is that he's at a little Catholic cemetery not far from where Belle Isle is. And that's not where the Catholic cemetery where my grandfather, where his mother is, or where his father is. And it's always just drove me crazy. But I feel so much better now knowing, even after almost 100 years, that I know exactly what happened to my grandfather's brother. Because my grandfather was only 3 at the time. And I think his mother didn't tell them intentionally to protect them from the not knowing of what really happened. So it seems crazy, but when I see things like that in true crime, you have to take it with a grain of salt, because people may actually believe that they are doing the right thing. They may actually believe that somebody just walking down the street, somebody that doesn't have a car, might be suspicious. They might see somebody walking at night and think it's suspicious. They might think they've seen something that is relevant, and it's just absolutely an innocent thing. Happens all the time. And the other little boy, Lawrence Flavin, that came up missing with my great uncle, his mother's brother was a detective in New York, Buffalo, New York. So just a devastating thing, but I'm just so glad that I was able to learn the truth, that I was able to tell my aunt before she passed, my mother's other sister who's still alive, and my mother, and to be able to actually find out what happened. So when it comes to true crime, people look at reports like this and they automatically assume, oh, that's got to be the truth. That person had, him and his wife, they must have seen this guy. Sure, it could be true. But like in this case, there was over a dozen people who said they saw something that never even happened. In 1926, people were inserting themselves into crime active cases or missing persons cases the same exact way people do today. You know why? Because it wasn't that crime didn't happen back then. It's that things have changed, and the way we process and see information today has changed. Social media, the digital age, has made information spread so much faster than what the Associated Press could do 100 years ago. And I think about all of these things all the time when it comes to true crime. And this is another perfect example that when my great uncle and his friend were missing, the original Lost Boys, there was another little boy who was saved, who had been kidnapped from another state and brought to Detroit. Because Michigan, even 100 years ago, we don't have the death penalty. So it was, like one Catholic priest had said in one of these articles, it was a haven for criminals, because they knew that if they came here, that if they were caught, they wouldn't get the death penalty like they would in Missouri or in other states. So there was actually a boy that was rescued during the time that Michigan State Police and the Detroit Police were actively looking for my grandfather's brother and his friend. But I was just amazed by that. I, for a whole year, went through this whole thing over and over and over, and I organized them all by exact date and time. Some articles, there was over a dozen articles that came out any one day, and going through it, I could not believe that somebody actually had the audacity to not only write a letter to the other boy's parents, but to my great-grandparents, trying to demand thousands of dollars. And in 1926, that's a crazy amount. I don't even know what the equivalent of today would be of that, but trying to actually ask them for money, and then coming to their house dressed as a Michigan State Police. The guy got a year. His accomplice, nothing. Not even probation. So it's really bizarre. But sometimes people, like this truck driver, swore that he saw the boys. In fact, my great-grandfather took over a week off of work at Ford in Detroit to go and search where this man said he saw the boys, this truck driver, and gave them a ride. Turns out wasn't even true. Was not even true at all. But this is my grandfather's brother at 9 when he came up missing, and his best friend. And both my great-grandfather and his Lawrence Flavin's father, Thomas Flavin, were both Knights of Columbus members. So, just very interesting. And I also know where the other little boy is buried, because he was buried next to my great-uncle until 11 years later when his father passed away suddenly from a heart attack. And I got all of the sheriffs that were in the active investigation at that time. The cemetery, exactly where he's buried. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, but it's taught me an immense amount about true crime cases and going through reports, because people take reports as if they are the gospel truth. But like I have to remind myself and remind people when I'm talking about things, true crime, or even going through reports like this, is that reports are only as good as the people that are documenting them. Same thing with medical records. And you're going to come across typos, small errors. You're going to come across where they accidentally misspell a name, or they accidentally mistaken what somebody said and transcribed it wrong. Because humans make mistakes. I make mistakes. You make mistakes. We all make mistakes. So you can't always look at every single type in these reports and look at it like it is the gospel truth. You have to take it with a grain of salt. And that's where a lot of people will just transcribe or read these and say, see, this, and this. But you also have to leave it up to interpretation, because you have to remember that mistakes happen, especially during an investigation like, this heinous murder of Claudinia Blanchard. I'm sure there was lots of people that were involved in the investigation. Lots of people thought they were doing the right thing by trying to help and call in. Like the fact that they just see a man at 10 a.m. walking around, or 10 p.m. walking around. Yeah, people walk. Lots of people don't have vehicles. Lots of people walk places or bike places. That's not uncommon. But when a crime like this happens, it makes everybody, it makes everybody be on high alert, and then everything you see becomes suspicious. And they might mean well by calling that in, but it also might be nothing. Could be something, could be nothing. You never know. But sometimes that takes up more of the investigator and the detective's time, which should be focused on really today more on circumstantial and evidence, like forensic evidence, whether it be DNA, fingerprints, processing. All of that takes time. The same way people don't understand that with an autopsy, with a medical examiner, that a preliminary autopsy report might come out, but it's going to take them 5 to 10 months to be able to get the toxicology lab reports back. That means all of the samples that they take, if they're able to do that, like biopsies, samples of organs, checking for certain things, whether it be blood, urine, stomach acid, hair, nail clippings, all of that. Sometimes people don't understand that either. There's a lot of new people in true crime, going through true crime, but that's always like my biggest thing, is just trying to look at everything through an objective lens. It's no secret that I think Gypsy Rose Blanchard is a liar. I think that's been pretty much documented and proven. She's a liar. I think she shows high degree of, in my own opinion, and I'm not an expert or a doctor, but I would say psychopathy and borderline personality disorder, if I had to make an estimated guess, because she displays every sign and symptom of that. But even Gypsy, some of the things that she has said have not all been lies. Because somebody is a liar, that doesn't mean that everything they say is untrue. And maybe even in her own mind, through her own perception, maybe she thinks she is rehabilitated or doing the right thing or trying to move forward in life. But I don't think she's ever going to come to a point where she can truly do that unless she's being honest. And any therapist or psychiatrist that is worth their weight would fundamentally start there. That in order for you to truly heal and move on, you have to start with the objective truth. Not the one you want to rewrite, not the one you want to convince people of. And when it was said 2 months before she got out of prison that she was getting out, she got her parole. I really hoped, because they also had dropped on October 12th of 2023 a trailer for the prison confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. And I immediately looked at that and noticed a really big lie. And that was like, wait a minute, this person murdered somebody. You don't have to stab the knife or shoot the gun. Missouri statute for first-degree premeditated homicide says anybody over the age of 18 who knowingly causes the death of another person after deliberation upon the matter. That is what she did. Nicholas Godejohn is technically her co-conspirator, her accessory to her crime that she orchestrated. And I just thought it was so weird that she's getting out, and this whole push to really, really sell this ramped up story of this abusive mom and this medical abuse and this scamming and conning. But little lies like the fact that Nicholas Godejohn did not rape her. It was consensual. Yet she still was trying to run that narrative even under oath on the stand. It blew me away. It blew me away. And I said the prison system, the legal system, our court system, they don't care about actually rehabilitating anybody. They don't care. They don't care about seeing somebody actually get better and to prove to be a functioning adult and citizen. They don't want to see that. Whatever she said in front of the parole board, taking accountability, whatever flowery words she gave them, I can guarantee it's all bullshit, because we've seen her do everything from call him an autistic little buttercup, mocking and making fun of everybody that has a mental disability or mental illness, while simultaneously trying to sell that she had postpartum depression and she has PTSD and all of these other things. She's even called him a psychopath, a sick piece of shit. She has called him other names. And these are all documented. I've showed them in my videos time and time and time again. Because she thinks that saying all of this horrible stuff about Nicholas Godejohn makes her look better by default. And it doesn't. Because now you're not only this heinous murderer who orchestrated this and pulled this autistic man into this after almost 3 years of knowing him. You know, you sought him out. You found him. You are the one who messaged him first. You are the one that made your relationship exclusive after 4 days. You are the one that took him on this emotional roller coaster that with him and his autism just didn't understand. He only understood that it was being loyal, that it was being loving, and he still seems to display that same exact loyalty to her today. You know, even with his interviews have saying previously before that if she doesn't want to be friends with me, then I'm okay with that. If she does, then I'm okay with that. But I love her still, and I'm never going to betray her. Because his brain, like in one sense, logically understands that his family has spoken to him and told him that, yeah, she manipulated you. She manipulated you. And he can recite that back verbally. But what I found was really weird about that is that he's not actually comprehending what that means. Because he then goes on to say that he's still going to be loyal to her and that he still would be her friend. He doesn't understand that Gypsy's manipulation came at the cost of, there was no loyalty or friendship there. It was because she was using him to do something she unsuccessfully was able to do twice before. And that's my own opinion about that. Okay, enough talk about Gypsy Rose. Because we all pretty sure that's pretty collective where everybody stands, you know, as far as she goes. She said a lot of things recently about the medical stuff. Still trying to hold on to that whole narrative. And she said nobody ever sat down and ever went through the medical records with her or explained anything to her. Isn't that what Mike Stanfield was supposed to do? Isn't that what he did years ago when he sat down and tried showing, look, it says Munchausen by proxy. Munchausen by proxy or some other underlying etiology to explain this. And it also said in the hearing test that Gypsy had been malingering because she wasn't cooperating and she was purposely giving wrong answers. And they can pick up on feigning. They can pick up on malingering on tests like that. They can tell if you can hear or not, or if you're giving them inaccurate answers because you can hear and you're just saying you can't. So they definitely caught on to her. But, you know, she's never actually sat down with a lot of people or anybody else and said, hey, you know, like, she claps back at people all the time in the comments, but she doesn't have no interest in actually sitting down with anybody oppositional to her because she can't control them. She can't manipulate them and gaslight them into believing and thinking what she wants them to believe and think by simply telling them this. When there's so much evidence out there, even things that she said and done that just kind of blows her whole story out of the water, especially when she was talking about being in the hospital for a month and swallow tests, and she didn't have no reason to have those glands removed. I've done whole videos on this 2 years ago, nearly 2 years ago now, how her medical records state in a almost 3-year period, she had a sleep study done. She was the one, not mom. She was the one that had been reporting that she was having issues with too much saliva. They tried her on an oral medication. Didn't work in 2.5 years. They tried physical therapy on her. Failed. Tried her on another oral medication. They did Botox injections. Now, after I had cancer and had a radical hysterectomy, I had that done 2 years after. They did Botox injections through my urethra into my bladder because my bladder started having issues with being overactive and whatnot from having the radical hysterectomy. So I noticed that right away because I have my own experience with that. They tried Botox injections into those 2 glands. Not all the other, you know, big ones or the hundreds of little ones that we have, 2. And from my understanding, they didn't move to have that surgery till later. It was not what she says, that her mother put Orajel on her mouth. They went to the doctor and boom, the doctor's already scheduling the surgery. That's it. That's not how that happened. And she still recently was in comment sections of certain content creators saying exactly that her mom put numbing cream. And I'm thinking, numbing cream? Like lidocaine? Numbing cream in your mouth? Because she ran with the Orajel thing. Just weird. Just so weird, because her own medical records, yeah, there could be a lot of stuff in there that is feigned, that is malingered. And it's hard. It's a hard case to be able to, especially with her mom not being here. With Gypsy not telling the truth. Nobody, not even her friends and family and her own lawyer, public defender turned manager Mike Stanfield for the last 10 years has ever sat her down and gone through them. And the people that have access to them, you know, they're not professionals either, but it's hard for anybody to discern what's real, what's not. You know, what was Dee Dee's culpability? What was Gypsy's culpability? Because throughout all of those 204 pages that the Good Wives Net has put out, and they recently put out another 84 pages from 2013, you see a lot where patient reports, not mom was squeezing her hand and forcing her to say that, and mom was talking, because that's another thing that she constantly said, was that she wasn't allowed to talk at doctor's offices. Her medical records prove that's not true. Going back to 14, she definitely was talking. She was lying on a hearing test. She lied to her doctor when she said she had no feeling but tingling sensation from the waist down. She was saying those things. PT reports means patient reports, not mom. So that is also a lie, to sit there and say that she never talked to doctors at all. At all, ever. That Dee Dee would hold her hand and she would do all the talking. Weird. Very weird. So her medical records are another thing that's just very hard to discern. And of course, people like Becca Scoops are better at that kind of thing. And even, with her husband being a retired detective and having that wisdom, having that experience, having that knowledge to be able to go through things and be able to present it and understand it in a better way, in a better light, so people can understand what this is, what this means. And it's hard because I've gone through the medical records myself too. And it's like, you don't know what's real and what's not real. What was Gypsy? What was Dee Dee? But you definitely see a lot of signs of what Gypsy has said is not true. So therefore, don't know what's true because you can't trust her to tell the truth. Dee Dee is not here, and she has done anything she can to possibly slam her mom, blame her mom, the same way she does Nick. Because in her mind, it makes her look less guilty. In her mind, it makes her look like the better person. And it reminds me of a friend of mine who was going through a custody battle and a divorce. And I remember telling her, the last thing you do is go into court and point fingers at your now ex and constantly say all these bad things about him. If you want to have your kids and you want to, look like you're the best parent to take care of your kids in court, what you do is you focus on yourself. You focus on yourself. You focus on your own therapy. You focus on what you're doing in your life to make sure you're stable, you're consistent, and that you can provide that for your kids. And you go into court and you don't go in front of a judge and point fingers saying that person's done this, and he was a cheater and a liar, and he's withheld money, and he was abusive, and yada, yada, yada. Because that doesn't prove that you're the better parent. That doesn't prove that you're in a stable and a consistent place to give the children the best, residential custody, physical custody. And I kind of think that way a little bit with true crime cases with Gypsy Rose Blanchard. It's a deflection is what it is. It's projecting and it's a deflection. It's saying, don't look at my bad, but look at their bad because it's worse. To take your attention away from, here's my bad, but look over there. And I always think that's weird because she took a plea deal and accepted her guilt. And she got extremely lucky getting off with 10 years. You would think she would get out and she would have been honest. And when I didn't see that, I was just blown away. I was blown away by mainstream media, especially the A&E network, which owns Lifetime. I was blown away that they were even accepting of doing this whole series and then doing a reality show and another reality show. But of course they were going to capitalize off of it. And we see her get out and immediately the lies, the gaslighting, the manipulation. And it's been 2 years now. And it hasn't changed at all. Gypsy, her behavior hasn't changed at all. In fact, it's gotten worse. The things that she's done to Ryan. And don't make me defend him. Do not make me defend him. Because he comes with a whole set of issues too. And I definitely don't agree with him being stuck after almost 20 months of not being with her and only being with her for not even 3 months, that he should move on. But I think Ryan's stuck, and it's not because he's in love with Gypsy. It's not because he has this unwavering, undying loyalty and love for her. I think it's the fame. I think it's the fame, the money. He got a little taste of that while she was with him. And when she left, that went with her. The cameras went with her. The revenue went with her. And I think that is what he's having a hard time coming to terms with, is that that's gone. But fame, power, connections, and wealth can make people do horrific things and make people go crazy trying to get it back, trying to get a taste of it again. But those are my thoughts. Those are not your thoughts. So let's get into this. This is with an interview with Kathy Cruz. It said Cruz had previously reported having contact with Gypsy, and this is again on June 16th. This was reported on June 30th. Kathy Cruz reported that she had contact with Gypsy and Claudinia at Cox South Hospital's emergency department on June 8th, 2015. And that's weird because Dee Dee's phone had been off, and we've all seen the video footage, the last known footage of Gypsy sitting Indian style while she's pretending to be a paraplegic, right? Sitting Indian style with her mother really struggling to take her into the hospital to get the feeding tube changed. So it says, on the morning of June 30th, 2015, Cruz contacted me by telephone, and I conducted an interview with her. Cruz stated she accompanied her daughter to Cox South Emergency Department. Cruz's daughter was seeking treatment for Cruz's granddaughter at the facility. While in the waiting area of Cox South Emergency Department, a white female seated near them introduced her and her daughter to Cruz and their family members. Cruz identified the mother as Dee Dee and the daughter as Gypsy. Dee Dee told Cruz they had been waiting in the emergency department for approximately 3 hours seeking treatment for Gypsy's feeding tube, which had become detached. So this isn't a normal just changing it out. It became detached. I wonder if it's because Gypsy was trying to pull it out, because she knew that this day was coming in 2 days, this crime, and she was very worried in the text messages with Nick if there was a hospital nearby. I'm wondering if it became detached because she started trying to tug it out or pull it out herself. Cruz stated she and her family left shortly and took her granddaughter to an urgent care facility for treatment. Cruz later learned that about Claudinia's death by way of local news media. Through local media outlets, Cruz understood Claudinia and Gypsy were believed to have last been seen on June 10th. Cruz then thought it may be relevant to notify the Greene County Sheriff's Office that she had observed Claudinia and Gypsy on June 8th in well condition. I wonder if she really was trying to pull her own feeding tube out. And I'm no expert, but I'm actually kind of curious. If you take the feeding tube out, do they ever have to suture it up? Or do they just actually remove it? They don't have to go in and suture anything? Or do they just bandage over it and let it close? If anybody knows the answer to that, please let me know, because I've never had a feeding tube. I don't know anybody that's ever had a feeding tube. I know there's different types, but I'm actually curious because I do know that some people that have had feeding tubes have had the ability to change it out themselves and not have to do this. But the fact that it had become detached, that they went to the emergency room, I'm thinking she was trying to take it out herself. And it probably hurt or was very uncomfortable. And she wanted it out in time for the crime and for Nick to get there. So that way when she leaves to go to Wisconsin or, frames him, the tube is already gone. But that's just my opinion. Really, really curious. Really, really curious. Now, this is on June 29th. This was also on June 16th. I was assigned to collect Cox South Hospital Emergency Department video surveillance from June 8th, 2015. Greene County investigators learned Gypsy Rose Blanchard had been admitted to the Cox Emergency Room located in Springfield, Missouri on June 8th at approximately 16:09 hours. And was discharged on the same date, approximately 1931 hours. Gypsy's mother, Claudinia Blanchard, had reportedly accompanied her for the duration of her treatment. On June 18th, I contacted Cox Security Captain Jeremy Michael by phone and requested the hospital's video surveillance from the aforementioned date and time range, which displayed Gypsy and Claudinia. Captain Michael stated he would begin gathering the video data from their recording system's data. The same day, he also notified me that they would require a search warrant to release the video footage to the Greene County Sheriff's Department. On June 22nd, Detective Sergeant Steve Martin completed and obtained a search warrant for the video footage for that date and time. On June 24th, Captain Michael notified me the video footage I had requested was complete and ready to be picked up. On the same date, I contacted Captain Michael at Cox South Hospital and took possession of 2 DVDs containing video data he had compiled. Captain Michael also completed a business records affidavit, relating to his collection and transfer of the data. On June 24th, while reviewing both DVDs provided by Captain Michael, I observed what I identified as Claudinia pushing a subject, who I identified as Gypsy, in a wheelchair into the Cox South emergency room entrance at approximately 16:09 hours on June 8th, 2015. At approximately 20:07 hours of the same date, I observed Claudinia and Gypsy exiting the Cox South emergency room in the same manner as they had entered. These times correspond with the admittance and discharge time of Gypsy's treatment documented by the facility. The aforementioned date and times of Claudinia and Gypsy's entry to and exit from the facility were acquired from the date and time display on the video footage. A business affidavit completed by Captain Michael was transferred to Detective Sergeant Steve Martin to attach his search warrant. Both DVDs collected from Captain Michael were later logged into the Greene County Sheriff's Office property room as evidence. Now, this one is a request for Gypsy's State of Louisiana birth certificate on June 25th of 2015. On June 16th of 2015, I was assigned to contact the State of Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals to request an official copy of Gypsy Blanchard's birth certificate. Greene County Sheriff's Office investigators had received multiple documents and reports of varying dates of birth given for Blanchard. She knew her date of birth. She tells investigators in her interrogation footage, she tells them that she has multiple different dates of birth. That means she knows it. She knows it. That means she's also participating because she's trying to explain to them why there's a different date on her Medicaid card, her real date of birth, than other documents. So she very much is aware that there's differing dates. If you didn't know your own age and you weren't participating and you didn't know, you wouldn't know that information to then relay that to investigators or try to explain it away. She was explaining it away like she had Munchausen, trying to make excuses, right? On that same date, I contacted the State of Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals Records custodian, Dean Smith, by phone, requested an official copy of Blanchard's birth certificate. According to Smith, the State of Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals required a request by mail, an official agency letterhead signed by the requesting person. On June 17th, 2015, I submitted a letter by mail to the State of Louisiana requesting a copy of Blanchard's State of Louisiana birth certificate. On June 22nd, 2015, I received an official copy of Blanchard's Louisiana birth certificate by mail in response to the aforementioned request. Blanchard's birth certificate verified her date of birth is July 27th of 1991. The official copy and the letter that accompanied it were scanned into the niche data. Sorry, my 13-year-old son, who has extremely long hair all the way down to his butt, was trying to make a bowl of cereal real quick, but I don't want the kids to be seen on any of my content or anything, so I try to be very cautious over that. It says that her date of birth was officially July 27th of 1991. She knows that because she states that same exact real date of birth as being on her Medicaid card. The official copy and the letter that had accompanied it were scanned into the database and later admitted to Greene County Sheriff's Office property room as evidence. My requesting letter, fax sheet, were also submitted with these documents as evidence. Okay, this one's a little bit long, so this might be the last one that I read. Because the next one is with Kim Blanchard. I have that damn song stuck in my head that is going viral everywhere. That Linda Perry song. I wake in the morning and I step outside. And I take a deep breath and I get real high. And now scream at the top of my lungs, what's going on? That song is stuck in my head all day. It's like an earworm. I just cannot get it out. Cannot get it out. The whole trend that everybody's doing, it's all over Instagram, all over TikTok, all over Facebook, all over YouTube Shorts. Keep seeing it. Okay, so this one was July 1st. but this took place on June 14th. After responding to Volunteer Way, I was assigned to interview Rachel Miller. Miller had arrived at the location after traveling from her residence in Kansas City, Missouri. Miller had also indicated that she had been granted power of attorney privileges over Gypsy Rose Blanchard. And that's funny because I think the Good Wives Network just did a video showing and explaining this, right? The power of attorney stuff. I think even Becca Scoops has done a really good video explaining that. Not my forte. I can read it, but certain things I might not be exactly great at explaining. Sometimes I ask you guys questions because I don't know, like with the feeding tube. Can somebody actually detach their feeding tube by trying to take it out? If they take a feeding tube out, they don't have to suture the stomach or the skin? That's my question. That's what I want to know. What did she think she was going to do if she was trying to pull her own feeding tube out? Anyway, let's get back to it. Miller stated that she had responded at the location. It's supposed to be at, but it says OT. The location after receiving 2 Facebook posts of Claudinia Blanchard and Gypsy Blanchard's joint Facebook page claiming someone had been killed and that the daughter had been raped. Miller could not reach Claudinia or Gypsy by telephone either. Miller had last spoken to Claudinia by phone on May 30th, 2015 and had received a Facebook message from Claudinia and Gypsy's Facebook account on June 4th of 2015. Miller was aware of Gypsy having issues with her feeding tube. And this is 4 days prior to it becoming detached. But she did not know of any other possible emergency medical conditions. Miller became good friends with Claudinia and Gypsy while Gypsy received medical treatment in the Kansas City area. Miller worked for Hope Lodge where Claudinia and Gypsy would stay during Gypsy's time of treatment. Miller had continued her relationship with the Blanchards, and Claudinia eventually requested Miller and her husband be power of attorney over Gypsy if anything were to happen to Claudinia. Yeah, but see, this is the weird part, is that Gypsy was over the age of 18 and had to be the one to sign all of that, right? Claudinia had told Miller, Rachel Miller, that Gypsy's father resided in Louisiana and wished to have nothing to do with Gypsy's life. Miller also noted, but see, here's the thing. Is that really a lie? Is that really a lie? Because I'm going to say this. Where the fuck was Rod and Christy at in Gypsy's life? Right? So was Dee Dee lying when she told people that Rod wanted nothing to do with Gypsy? Because where the fuck was he in Nicolette's life? Right? He was too busy with option number 3, having a new family. Too busy to care about his other kids. So when it says Claudinia had told Miller that Gypsy's father resides in Louisiana and wished to have nothing to do with Gypsy's life, she was almost 24 years old, and she hadn't seen her dad in over 10 years. Is that a lie? I don't think that's a lie. He proved he didn't want to be in her life. He didn't want to be an active participant in her life. Only if it was convenient for him. And when it wasn't convenient, he didn't care. He didn't make time. He didn't make it a priority. He made his wife and his 2 kids that he had with his wife a priority. So I don't think that this is an egregious lie that they're trying to make it out to be. Because Rod wasn't in her life, meaning he's a full-grown man willingly making that choice to not be in Gypsy's life or to be an active participant in Nicolette's life. So when Dee Dee tells people that, that's not actually untrue. Miller also noted that Claudinia had recently complained about a male harassing Gypsy at a local movie theater in April or May of 2015. Claudinia claimed that she reported the incident to local law enforcement, but Miller doubted Claudinia followed through with the report. The male later sent Gypsy flowers to the Blanchards' residence. Claudinia had also complained about her neighbor, Debbie. Claudinia had told Miller that Debbie would force her way into the Blanchards' residence at times and would not let Claudinia answer the phone calls when Debbie was present. Claudinia also believed Debbie's son, who had not been nice to Claudinia and Gypsy in the past, had recently stolen medication from their residence. And I'm just going to say it. This is why David and Kim Blanchard won't answer questions on Facebook and block people, because they knew that there was something more going on with that hydrocodone, because conveniently, David Blanchard mentions Dan Glidewell in his not even 25-minute long interrogation tape. And one of the first things he mentions is that Dan Glidewell was hanging around because he knew that Dee Dee got hydrocodone, Norco, Vicodin, right? It's kind of weird for David Blanchard to know that. The only reason he would know somebody's personal prescriptions is if Claudinia had told him or Gypsy had told him. Which also begs the question, was David and Kim Blanchard, who conveniently helped run GoFundMes for Gypsy, and then the moment they find out that Claudinia is dead, make a GoFundMe for Dee Dee for her funeral services or her cremation? I think that while she might have had medication stolen because Gypsy was doing it, she had caught Gypsy doing it before. Hell, even Dan Glidewell might have had an issue with the pain pills, the opiates. But I certainly think, in my own opinion, that David Blanchard and Kim Blanchard know a lot more about that monthly prescription and selling it than what they have been honest and forthright and forthcoming about. Because Dee Dee Blanchard also had absolutely nothing, including any kind of opiates, in her system at her death. Which begs the question, if she's getting 1, 2, 3 of them a day, that would be 90 for every 30 days. What is she doing with them? Well, it's not uncommon for people to sell them. Not uncommon at all for people to sell them. In fact, that's very common for decades. It could also help explain why she had that much money saved in her safe. But it also is really weird because why would he mention that in his interrogation? That has always bothered me. And when he's been directly asked, he refuses to answer any questions on if he and his wife were buying Norco's, Vicodin, hydrocodone off of Dee Dee, or if they were helping her sell them. Acting as a middleman. I think Gypsy definitely knows her mom was doing something with them, because there's no way she was not taking them at all in her system. And if you're physically dependent on something like that, you're going to have it in your system at the time of your death. So you're either taking them or you're not. She might have took a half of one here and there, maybe to do a urinalysis if her doctor required it. But I really think that David Blanchard knew more about the medication. And I think that here, when Claudinia is saying that somebody had recently came into her house and stolen medication, I don't know if she actually believes that that's true. Or if she knew, because at 19, when Gypsy ran away, she caught her with her Vicodin before. And money. So she certainly knew there was a problem with Gypsy's behavior. For sure. That could be her covering for her. She did the same thing when she had to go to the hospital when she was shot 10 times with a high-velocity BB gun, on June 14th, 2011. The second attempted murder that she made on her mom's life. Okay, so we're going to finish this up really quick. It says at the end here that Miller elected to stay at a local hotel until Gypsy and Claudinia were located, which was probably a great expense out of her pocket. That's how much she cared and loved about Dee Dee and Gypsy. Yeah. Miller also agreed to meet with me the following morning to provide me with a copy of the power of attorney documents in case something had happened to Claudinia, as Miller believed that Gypsy was still a juvenile and